So if we're made, who made us? We made ourselves. That wouldn't sound like we were made, though. Because if we're saying that we're made for a purpose, that would suggest that there's some overarching plan for it.
Oh yeah, God.
So that's what's being implied when we say things like that. It's kind of like if you say, oh, karma, what goes around comes around. When you say things like that, you may not mean to say it, but what you're saying is that there's some kind of a being out there that is organizing things or arranging things in the universe such that when you do something bad, it puts something bad in front of you. Maybe we don't mean to think of it that way, but that's exactly what you're saying. In other words, if there's karma, there has to be someone or something that's putting bad or good stuff in front of you. Now, the scary thing about that, well, I guess it's terrifying on two aspects. It's terrifying in one aspect because if it's true that something like karma exists, how much deep shit are you in right now? Now, another terrifying prospect is that there's no such thing as karma, which means that there's no answer for evil. And if there's no answer for evil, then that means that there's no accountability for it. And that means that people can just kind of go on doing evil as much as they want, and nothing's ever going to stop them until somebody maybe who's more evil comes along, or, as we've talked about, someone who's able to unleash that monster that's inside of them. So, bear with me for a second. If we're talking about a being like God, what are the attributes that God is supposed to have?
Light.
What's that?
Light.
Lights?
That's what I've heard.
Like lights?
I guess.
Huh.
Holy divine light.
That he's good.
Okay, so one of them is that he has to be good. And not just good, he has to be like the goodest of all the good.
Perfect.
He has to be, exactly, he has to be perfection. And the word for that is omni, that means all, and then omni, what's that? Omnibenevolent. Yeah. He's all loving, all good, omnibenevolent. What else does he have to be? What's that?
Old.
What's that?
He has to be old.
Well, he would be outside of time, so he wouldn't even have an age.
A creator?
A creator. That's, by the way, I think that what you're going to find is that that's the thing that distinguishes God. That's the thing that makes God God. He's a creator. That's probably why we worship, in a certain sense, musicians. Because they're creators. That's why we worship artists. Because they take something, they make something out of nothing. They take, in a sense, they take paints, they put it onto a canvas, and then we're blown away by what they've done. They take a hunk of stone, and then they make something out of it. Musicians pull notes out of the ether somewhere, arrange them, and then make a song out of them. So,
let's go.
What's that?
We play God, let's go.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons that we refer to them as like musicians as like rock gods and stuff like that. So there's a certain sense of, so in order to do that, he's going to have to be omnipotent. That's part of being a creator. It's that you're omnipotent. You are all powerful. So he's all loving, he's all powerful, and there's something else that he has to be in order for him to be him. It's another thing that we praise, by the way, in humans. What's that?
Intelligent?
Intelligent, yeah. So omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient. He knows everything. Because he created it. It's like if you ask Michelangelo, are there any, to talk about one of his paintings, he can tell you all about it. He can tell you from the beginning to the end how it started and how it's going to turn out. In fact, he can tell you how it's going to turn out before he's even done painting it. Because the artist can see it up here and conceptualize it. In the same way, God is all-knowing. He can conceptualize the beginning, the middle, and the end. We can't, because we're inside of it. But if he's the creator, then he knows everything. Literally everything. And so he's all loving, all-powerful, and all-powerful. All-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. Now, part of being loving, we oftentimes think like, so that means he just forgives anything. No, because part of love is justice. So he's also very just. And you can start to see where other characteristics start to flow from this. He's forgiving, it's true, but he's also just. He also has the power to forgive. He also knows who to forgive. So far, so good? Now, here's where the problem sorts in. Kittens get hit by cars,
Oh.
right? Moms get cancer. Genocides happen. The Holocaust happened. So is it the case that how can an all-loving, all-powerful, and all-knowing God allow that stuff to happen? Either he cares about it, and he doesn't want it to happen because he loves us, and maybe he's all-powerful, and he could stop it, but maybe he's just not paying attention to us. Maybe he's like my dad. He started the whole thing and he walked away from it. Which is a possibility. Maybe he creates the universe in the same way that Michelangelo creates a painting and says, neat. And because he's omniscient, here he knows how it's all going to go, then he just kind of walks away from it. But if he's not omniscient, then he doesn't know how it's going to go. He just kind of creates it and walks away from it, doesn't know how it's going to end. Or maybe he does know about our suffering. Maybe he knows about the kitten and the mom and the genocide. Maybe he is all-powerful. He could stop it. Maybe he just doesn't love us enough to do it. Maybe he just doesn't care about us enough, like the way we feel about ants. Or maybe he does care about us. Maybe he does know about it, but maybe he's just not able to stop it. So you create this paradox where it seems that God can't be all three of these things at once. And so we have to try to figure out a way to rectify that if that's possible. And so the way it's by the way, this is called the problem of theodicy. There's a long, I was going to say a great book, but it's a great book, but it's a very, very long and difficult book. It's called Theodicy by a guy named Leibniz. A guy named Leibniz. Wilhelm Gottfried Leibniz. And he writes this big, giant book to answer this question. And in short, the answer to the question is this. In order for God to be God, he has to be perfect. Okay? If there's something else in the universe that's also perfect, then that means it's co-equal to God. And then therefore God wouldn't be God. It's a contradiction. It's a logical contradiction. Therefore, God has to be the only thing in the universe that's perfect. And so therefore, because he's the only thing that's perfect, then he has to have anything else that exists has to be at least a little bit less perfect. And Leibniz argues and says, this is the best of all possible worlds. This is the best of all possible universes. Yes, there's evil in the universe, and yes, God allows it to happen under his omnipotence, but he has to allow it to happen because if the universe was perfect, and if our lives were perfect, we would all be co-equal with God. So therefore, there has to be some level of suffering. That's the solution. But now, of course, it begs that question, does there have to be so goddamn much suffering? Couldn't I have just stubbed my toe when I was 3 years old and said, life is suffering, and then everything else the rest of my life been perfect? Does there have to be so much suffering? Couldn't we have just suffered just a little bit? And it begs that question because what Frankl is saying here is that if there's a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering because suffering is such an intricate part of life. What else is life besides suffering? What else is it?
Life is good.
Life is good. What do you mean by good?
As in it's cherishable. You can cherish it. And it's not all bad and it's not, the greatest, but you cherish it in the end because of your, experiences, the people around you,
That's that problem. We cherish it at the end. We cherish it at the end. The best part of the cheeseburger is once it's gone and we realize, wow, that was a great cheeseburger. But now it's gone forever. We can start off and there can be certain parts during the cheeseburger where we like it, but a lot of times it's at the end that we really appreciate the thing that it was. You can look back, and that's part of the problem is that the more sand that's passed out of the hourglass, the more clearly we can see through it. The more time that's passed in our lives, the more we can look back on it. And I don't say this to you thinking it's going to make a whole hell of a lot of sense right now. It'll make a little bit of sense right now in the small things of your life, like maybe eating a cheeseburger, or maybe going out with your friends. That it's at the end of all of it that you look back on and go, today was a good day. It's like if you guys ask me, you come and you ask me, how's it going? I give you one of two answers. I say, every day's Christmas. And I think I told you why I say that, yes? No, I never told you? That's too bad. Yeah. And then the other answer I'll give you is I'll say, yeah, so far so good, but I never judge the day till the night. Because you never know until the end of the day if your day was a good day. When you're laying down in bed, then you can look back on it and you can cherish it. Life is a lot of things, man. Life is suffering, yes. Life is also joyous. But I think that what you're going to find is that whatever things you fill in here, these are all with an asterisk. Life can be these things. Life can be good. I'll say it again. Life can be good. But by the way, so can almost any experience that you have. Your English class can be good if you apply yourself properly to it. Chemistry can be good if you apply yourself to it properly. Family reunions can be good if you apply yourself to it properly. So much of that is going to be a choice, though. That's why I have the asterisk here. Life can be joyous, but there are people who are so committed to being miserable. You might know people like this. You try, we can call them pessimists, but there are some people that are just so committed to just being miserable that even when good things just fall into their laps sometimes, they find a way to destroy it. They find a way to torpedo it. Maybe not even trying to, but just subconsciously. And just knowing as many people as I know, I would bet David's right leg that somebody in here, at least a couple of you in here, are that person. In other words, you find a way to make misery out of something joyous. There's just something of our personality type that we won't let ourselves be happy. Life can be good, but here's the thing. It cannot not be this. It cannot not be death. It cannot not be faith. And that's what he's getting at. So these are these three things here that are all as much a part of life as breathing and thinking. Even eating and drinking are a choice. Everything else is not a choice. These are the three things he's pointing out here. What's going to happen is going to happen. But can you find meaning in it? Yeah. That's the key. If you could find something meaningful in it. If there's going to be any meaning in life, you have to find a meaning in your suffering. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer. But you get to choose what you're going to suffer for. Too often in life, we don't think of ourselves as having that kind of freedom. We just think right now, oh man, I have to be in this class right now, this sucks. You don't have to be here. Leave. I don't think I've ever begged anybody to stay in my class before. No, but then if I leave, you mark me absent. Yeah, because you're absent. But then my mom is going to, okay, then you're choosing your suffering. Which suffering do you want? Do you want the suffering of being here, or do you want the suffering of having to deal with your mom? Because if you come here, and then you unleash your suffering here by being a jerk in class, by being a distraction, by being an annoyance, by antagonizing people around you, or antagonizing the teacher. For God's sake, I didn't come to anybody's house here and drag you over here. I don't understand for the life of me why sometimes students will be jerks to teachers. At the beginning, I can see where teachers will earn it over time. But even as you come in here, have I ever forced anybody in here to work? Have I ever pulled anybody aside and been like, why are you late today? Have I ever told anybody anything except stop being obnoxious? If you're being loud and obnoxious and you're distracting people around you, of course, because what happens is you're bringing your suffering into the world and you're making the world a worse place for it. I saw something recently on Instagram. I hate quoting Instagram stuff, but someone posted it and it says something to the effect of, if you don't deal with the things that have cut you in life, then you're going to bleed on the people who didn't cause it. Something to that effect. In other words, if you bring your suffering into a class, it's I don't want to be here, so then you become obnoxious to everybody around you. But nobody asked you to be here. You could leave. If you're choosing this suffering, then choose this suffering. Don't make the world a worse place. And this class is just a metaphor for the world. When you go out into the world, nobody asked you to drive your car down the street. Don't bring your suffering into the world by cutting people off and yelling at people just because you're in a bad mood, because you're making the world a worse place. The world is a worse place for you having been here. And that's a horrible, horrible thought to get into your head, especially if you get near the end of life and you have to make that decision if life was cherishable or whether you actually made the world a worse place. I mean, right now, you can change that. So right now, if you're walking around thinking like, oh, I'm making the world a worse place, I just shouldn't be here. Yeah, you should be here. You shouldn't leave yet. Because you have the opportunity to make the world such a wonderful place. And not even just the world generally, but your own world, such a wonderful place. You have all of this opportunity ahead of you that you can't even see. And I promise you, you can't even see it yet. All it takes is to live virtuously, to live rightly, to choose the proper level of suffering. And you already know what that is. It's to assume responsibility. Because if you assume responsibility, you make something meaningful out of life. You make the world a better place. You make everybody around you better. But what if they're jerks? Who cares? It's not about them. It's about you. If you're going to go through life trying to tinker every little thing, well, your Jenga puzzle is going to fall apart, man. And if you're going through trying to like, well, I'm going to be nice to this person because I want to make this happen, and then if I make this happen, this is going to happen. Those things fall apart. But what doesn't fall apart is right action. Tell the truth. Or at least, at the very least, stop lying. Stop saying things that aren't true. And then once you can do that, then you can start to put yourself together in a way that you can tell the truth. Then you're an upright character. Does that mean that people aren't going to lie about you? Does that mean that people aren't going to say terrible things about you? No, of course they're going to, but that's not about you. That's about them at that point. That's how they're choosing to behave. How you choose to behave. Do you choose to go forward in life and engage suffering, meet it, face it, overcome it, and develop a sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Do you choose to be a role model for the children that many of you are going to have someday? Or are you going to have to lie about being a role model? Or worse yet, are you not going to be a role model and still tell your children the same thing? Hey, I was terrible. Don't do what I did. Oh yeah, that works. No, it's better to be the upright character, to tell the truth boldly. What's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you. But everything costs you in life. If you're going to lie, that's going to cost you also. If you tell the truth, it's going to cost you. Stop me if you've heard this before. Life is suffering. You get to choose, hopefully, what you're going to... Are you going to suffer for lying, or are you going to suffer for telling the truth? Are you going to suffer for having a poor character, or are you going to suffer for having a strong character, a good character? Because you might think, if I lie, I can get away with some things, I can get ahead. No. We all pay for what we do. We all pay for what we do. Some pay sooner, some pay later. But we're all going to pay for what we do. And we're also going to pay for the things that we don't do. Because, stop me if you've heard this before.
Life is suffering.
Life is suffering. But you can choose. But you can choose. It's difficult. It's hard. It's hard to choose the right thing. Because the right thing sucks. So maybe there's something else that goes along with the right thing. Yeah, maybe there's something that goes along with the right thing to make the world more livable, to make it more cherishable. Which is a word called grace. And I've had to fight myself in the past couple of years to still like this word, because there's somebody who I particularly dislike who kept using the word. They kept saying, you know, showing grace, and this person was not a graceful person. And so, to show grace means to be forgiving. To be forgiving. I was thinking yesterday, I had a student come up to me and they just messed something up really big, and they came up and they asked me something. I said, you know what? Before the guy just goes, all right, I'm sorry, I fucked up. I go, oh, all right, water under the bridge. It's forgiven, like it never happened. You know, I was all ready to just tear this person apart, and he literally just stood like that. I fucked up. It stands up like this guy. Hey, what do you want from him? That's right. All right, understandable. Because people mess up, and I know there are people out there who are just like, you know, I'm not going to forgive anything. Only God forgives, not me. What a miserable person you are. Because and I'm not saying you should forgive everything. You know what I mean? If Hitler shows up, he's like, I messed up. What do you want from me? You know, there's some accountability that's there, of course. But people mess up, and we should be understanding of why that happened. Why? Because people are suffering. And a lot of the bad decisions that you're going to make in life are going to be because of that thing of suffering. That's why I talk about it so much, because it's such an important concept. How it is that you face the suffering. Because I don't know if I've mentioned this before to you, but life is suffering. It's ineradicable. And I keep mentioning it because it's such a big part of your life that how you face it is going to determine so much of your life. Do you shrink from it? Do you engage it? Because most of the bad decisions that we make in life are going to be to alleviate suffering. I don't want to get caught for, I did something bad, so I chose the wrong path. I chose the unvirtuous path. And now, in order to avoid the suffering, to avoid the consequence of that path, I now have to lie. So now I have to compromise my character even more, and then to cover up that lie, and now you've got this big web of things, and you can get to a point in life where you sit back and go, how the hell did I get here? This is so complicated. You have to engage the suffering. But understand that the suffering is happening because you were trying to avoid an unvirtuous action. What that means, therefore, is that everybody else is doing the same thing too. The reason that people are lying to you is because they're trying to avoid some level of suffering. They're trying to avoid some level of suffering. The reason that people are doing these things is because they're trying to avoid suffering. And that doesn't mean that we totally forgive it, but hopefully that means that we totally understand it. We can relate to it. We can empathize with it. And if we can empathize with it, we can be forgiving towards it. If we can be forgiving towards it, we can show people that it's okay to behave properly. It's okay to tell me the truth. You know, and some people I get never get it. Some people never get it. You know, some of you still just, and I understand it. I'm one person in your life, but I don't know if any of you ever told me the truth about something and I've just kind of thrashed you for it. No. I want you guys to just fill up garbage. I can't remember which class it was, but one of my classes, somebody was writing in their journal and they were just filling it with song lyrics. I'm not supposed to, you know? Like, so let's just say I didn't notice that, and you got away with it. What did you prove? Well, you don't even read these. Did I ever tell any of you guys I read these things? Which ones do I read? If you get an A, you score 90% or above, I put them aside and I read those. I have a couple over there I still need to finish reading through. Because that shows me that you cared enough to write it, and so I want to honor that and read what you wrote, because you probably wrote something interesting. If I catch you, I've caught people plagiarizing on these things, they just copy stuff offline. What does, if there is a meaning in life at all, blah, 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 what does that mean? And people will go up on Quora and they'll copy down some completely wrong answer, by the way, which is usually how I catch it. I'll skim them as I go through. I'll go, that's not a word that a person like this would use, and it's completely wrong anyway. Huh. And I go through it. And I look at it and I go, interesting, and I find them. Sometimes I find them on old journals too. I go back and change them. But even then, it's like, wow, so what a wonderful person you are. You lied to me. The one person in your life who accepts all truth from you. The one person in life of you say, can I just go walk around? Yeah. The one person in your life who gives you all the trust and you lied to them. Good for you. And then we'll leave school and we'll applaud ourselves and go, man, I just bullshitted my way through. Congratulations. You got good at lying to people. That will serve you very well in all of your relationships in your life. That will serve you very well in your work life. And that will serve you very well when you have children. And then that will serve you very well at the end of your life if you actually look back honestly and evaluate yourself. And ask yourself if your life was cherishable or if it was just the art of a bullshit artist. Inauthentic. Unreal. And then realizing that you may have brought children into the world and passed those same characteristics on to them. So you're going to perpetuate a cycle of the world being bad. And probably still be that person who complains about the world. Man, we don't deserve dogs. Many people don't. But that doesn't mean you can't. It doesn't mean you can't. That's part of grace. Being able to turn around at any moment, to change from what you're doing. To embrace the suffering. Because if you don't embrace the suffering, it's going to lead you to some bad decisions in life. It doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you should face it. And if you can employ that monster inside of you to face it, even better. But it's just as much a part of life as fate and death. So find your meaning in suffering. If there's a meaning, you can create it, whatever it is. Create it for yourself. Authentic. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Tuesday.